Welcome to the Fat Dad Fishing Show podcast, the podcast aimed at helping saltwater fishermen catch more fish in less time and have a better on-the-water experience. My name is Rich, and I'm the host of this show. In this episode, I'm joined by co-host Ed, who's the owner of Captain Hank's Tackle, and John, who's the owner of Creely Custom Rods. We have a great guest for this episode. His name is Mike Warriner. He's one of these just really fishy dudes. He's always catching anything he's targeting, and one of the things that he's been targeting over the past few years is sheepshead from his kayak. So Mike's coming on tonight. We're going to talk in detail how he targets them, the success that he's had. So kick back, relax, and take it all in. Let's jump into this one. So Mike is one of those guys that really, what did I say last time? You're a fishy dude. You just get out there and you get on the fish, and tog is a really big one for you, but also sheepshead. And sheepshead is really starting to explode as an emerging fishery that's been gone for decades in New Jersey, New York waters, and they've made their way up. And Mike has kind of dialed them in on the kayak. And I think, Mike, your largest one is what, a 14-pounder?
Just over 14 pounds. I had two that day. The second one we ended up weighing, it was 13.6. And the first one was relatively significantly bigger. So modestly, we'll say 14 plus.
That's awesome. That's awesome. The entire kayak. Now, here's the cool thing. If you can fish for sheepshead on a kayak, and Mike's going to share some of his stuff on that, it directly translates to boats, and it directly translates to shorebound as well. So while you're primarily fishing from a kayak, this is something that pretty much is going to translate to anybody. So Mike, why don't you share with everybody how you kind of got started with not just sheepshead, but the saltwater fishing and especially the kayak fishing. And then we'll just jump right in and start talking about the sheepshead.
I guess I got started I grew up in Apsecan, so I've always been around it. I'm from a fishing family, a family of clammers. I spent my whole life, early years clamming. That was kind of what I did. So you get a feel for where you live and your environment. The kayak, I always had them since I was a kid. Started off on like a little ocean kayak frenzy. And then, the pedal drives kicked in and it just goes from there. It's, it's fun. It's a different experience when you catch a fish on such a little boat, especially a bigger fish, that if it gets you that excited on a big boat, then it'll definitely get you excited on a small boat. And to me, that's what it's about. It's about the excitement. The day that I don't get like this over it then what's the point,
I'm right with you. And they do pull you around.
Yeah, it's fun.
And they'll spin you. When he comes on talking about that 23-pound tog, he made the point in his post. There he is. He's all alone. I
can't even imagine
all
that.
Alone. I know. There's no one there. It doesn't fit in the net. And he's got to get that thing onto the deck. And, the accomplishment there is absolutely ridiculous. And I would say it's probably, I don't know if you got that sheepshead into the net, but it doesn't matter. It's the same thing. When you bring a big fish up next to the boat, it's something. When it's a kayak, it's just something different. It adds a little bit extra, right?
Yeah. And also, it's also the benefit of, I feel like, look, if you've got a $45,000, $50,000 boat, you're not going to get up as tight to those bridges as you can with it's just, to me, it's just, look, there's a lot of guys that do it, but to me, it's just the benefit of just being able to just put that thing right up on a piling or a bridge and just hold on to the side. I don't recommend tying off or anything like that. That's just dangerous, but getting yourself in a position where you can just hold on and kind of keep yourself real tight up to that.
Well, and to add to that, you have the mobility and
you're
not so worried about hitting the piling with your plastic boat versus your fiberglass boat that goes crunch. So I totally see what Mike's.
But at the same time, it's got its negatives too, especially with sheepshead. I think that you're going to be more successful with sheepshead fishing if you, not more successful, but higher numbers, because I feel like sheepshead fishing in a way is, even though it's like kind of like a real finessey light tackle technique, I still feel like you kind of want to drive it in and power fish it and be able to have that ability to jump from spot to spot. You know what I mean? So you're kind of limited to that as far as the kayak goes, because once you choose an area, I mean, you're kind of, you got to time the tide and everything right, and you're kind of limited to that area once you're in it. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're going to have to pedal a mile, pretty
yeah.
much. If you think of South Jersey, which is where most of the fish are, reported. I don't know if they could be north and people just aren't fishing for them as much. But you take, you go down to Cape May and you go through those bridges, and they're like, it's like a mile in between. Then you get up to Wildwood, it's like a mile in between, mile and a half. And then Stone Harbor, about a mile, up to Avalon, a mile and a half. Another mile. I mean, that's a lot of pedaling. That's a lot of pedaling.
I think what you said right there is important as far as we don't really know. So it's kind of like getting out there and exploring it and finding where they're at. Look, it's what you said is there's not a lot of people target them, especially New Jersey. Our tog season doesn't start till later. So you're not going to get them as bycatch there because there's not as many people togging on the bridges. Look, you're not going to bycatch sheepshead flounder fishing or fishing for weak fish. You got to target them. You know what I mean? So it's time, and it's like you said, people aren't targeting them. So we don't really know, you could give areas and just go explore it, and they're probably there. We hear them all the way up to Manahawkin and Barnegat, and sometimes even a bit further north. And, a lot of spearfishers get them, even further up. They've been seen, Shrewsbury rocks, divers have seen them, so it's just about, I think, getting out and targeting them.
I've heard a lot of stories from people, secondhand. I personally don't know more. I actually only know one diver and never talked to him about whether he's seen sheepshead. I'm sure he has. But the stories that I've heard from people that I trust, I'm not going to say any locations or anything because I was given specific spots with quote unquote hundreds of eater size. Eater size being the smaller ones, the less mature, under 10 pounds. These are probably 5 pounders, 4 pounders, 3 pounders. So if you're going to eat one, that's the recommended size. I've never eaten one, but apparently they taste better, like most fish when they're smaller. But I want to go back to your point about the boats. So I did have a boat, and I sold my boat, and it wasn't a $45,000, $50,000 boat, but I still didn't like bringing it right up on the structure. And I've made some points in videos about flounder fishing where people are just missing the spot. They're next to the spot, but they're just not right on the spot. And I even say in the one video, at least one of the videos, I don't blame them because I know that they don't want to put the bow of that boat up on that sod bank, knowing it's going to go from 30 feet deep up to 0. And they're going to end up, with their luck, if it were my luck, I'd come down on a wake and I would hit hard onto something that's sticking up out of that sod bank, and I'd puncture the glass on the bottom. So, but man, it's times 100 now when you're talking about bridges and rocks. Again, go back to Ed. Ed was being very careful and still got swept onto a jetty rock, this weekend. And one of the comments in the chat is, what about spot lock? Well, spot lock isn't going to help either because spot lock's going to end up swinging the boat a lot. It's going to keep moving it, and the last thing you want to do is start swinging that with those currents coming around. You're going to end up hitting the bridge, or you're going to end up hitting that propeller on something. Usually you have lines hanging off, where people used to tie up on the bridges. You have all these ropes, swinging out from them. I can tell you one bridge that I can't tell you. I know it's there, and I've lost so many lures. It keeps Ed in business because I keep having to replace lures on this stupid rope because it's a good spot. It's a good bridge piling, but I keep hooking it.
Michael, go dive it.
Collect all your tackle.
With the spot lock too, if you're under a bridge, you very well may lose GPS signal. Like if you have like satellite radio in your car,
I wonder if that happens.
And you go through like a car wash or something, you lose reception. Same principle. So if you don't have GPS signal, then the spot lock don't know where the heck you're at.
It does. I've actually experienced it firsthand.
It loses.
It will. So I've noticed that it's when you're underneath that bridge, you lose that GPS signal, and the spot lock just goes haywire, and the boat starts swinging all over the place.
And that's a safety issue. But the reason I wanted to bring that up is to continue with what Mike was saying. You still have you got huge concerns on a kayak too, though, right? So first of all, let's just talk about bridges to start. So bridges are inherently dangerous areas. I could tell you one up near AC that we have fished several times, and people don't slow down. They come flying through that bridge, just plowing water. And I'm talking every size boat in the middle of summer, boats like powering down immediately and jerking off to the side because somebody's flying by through the other direction. So it's dangerous that way. You have the strong currents and the eddies. So you have swirling waters. You know, in a kayak, it can be really tough. So Mike, what are you doing with your kayak to get yourself in the right spot to be catching these? Because it is not easy to hold a bridge. I don't care what kind of kayak you have. It's not easy to hold a bridge.
Well, I guess that's kind of the trick is obviously you want to come in from it down current and approach it because you're going to be on, you know, that side of the bridge. For me, I mean, you'll see me all the time. I get up right up on it and I hold on to it. I mean, just that simple. I just grab onto whatever I can. You know what I mean? If you can sit there and kind of position yourself, point your nose towards the current and the wind and just kind of get on a slow pedal. But just, I think the best way is to just find a way to hold on. And that's the trick, because I know a lot of times when you're going to do it on a boat, you got a couple guys there, you got one guy fishing for him and one guy holding on. So you've got the task of doing both things. You know what I mean?
You're the opposite kind of kayak fisherman than I am. I will not stand up unless I'm casting flats or something like that. You stand up for, I don't know, random. You just stand up out of nowhere. I don't even know why you're standing. I just see your head pop up, and then you're fishing for a little bit. Then you're sitting down. You're turning around. You're walking all over the place.
I think a big part of that, honestly, is because that's how I've always been so used to fishing, especially structure like that and bottom fishing my entire life. Is because look, you're standing on a boat or you're standing on something. I don't feel as comfortable feeling the bite and detecting it and, you know, setting that hook as I do sitting down as when I'm standing up. I think it's just awkward for me. So look, I mean, I'm getting older. It's not as good, but I'm relatively, I've got a good sense of balance. I've spent a lot of life, you know, my youth was spent skateboarding and, you know, surfing, and I'm very comfortable. I'm comfortable standing up. Like I said before, don't try and do some of the stuff I do. It's not safe.
He has X-ray vision, so for it to work, he needs to stand, and then he sees the bottom.
Yeah, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and I'm not saying don't stand.
Be comfortable.
Let's take it to the next step. You're holding a bridge differently, because holding a bridge when you're sitting is a lot different. Mm-hmm. And it does create the problem where if you're going to hold it, you're up sideways too. So hopefully you're still facing into the current, but then it comes down to keeping your rudder in the correct direction with the current coming at it, because it's like you're moving, right? So you got a few miles per hour of current coming through. You're holding on the side, which does take a bit of strength because you have to hold your nose up there. But the best thing is if you can do that, first of all, if you ever get turned and you're going to go broadside, just let go. Just let yourself go and let the current take you and spin you out the back and just reset.
A lot of times you'll watch, I sit broadside and fish between my kayak and the piling. And if you watch, a lot of times I'll keep that. You got to understand the boat that I'm on, my drive, my propeller is on my rudder. You see what I'm saying? So I'll turn that rudder. And a lot of times you'll see me reach down with my hand and grab the pedals with my hand and turn it to kick that boat back, back to its side again. Because I like to try to keep it fishing with my boat sideways and dropping between the kayak and whatever, a piling of whatever I'm fishing. It's tricky.
I don't turn sideways on mine. It is
got
tricky.
The pivot drive, so it's a little bit different setup than what the old towns have.
It does spin that back. I mean, as soon as you get on that drive, it starts kicking that back right back wherever you want it. It is very maneuverable boat, but also I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a position of the drive, but the old towns, even though it's definitely the new canoe with that drive is a lot more maneuverable, old towns are a lot faster. I notice when I'm trying to keep up with him, I'm working a lot harder on the pedals than he is. And same with you. I'm working a lot harder on it.
We noticed that we were talking about that yesterday. Yeah, we were definitely both faster than you, but you were way out maneuvering us. It's a very interesting drive that you have on that. And I've never used it, but I know you love it. So
I do. We'll see how long it holds up in the salt water, that whole worm drive system that it has. They haven't been out that long. I think there's a lot of guys with them in fresh water. So we'll see how long that actual drive holds up. I'll
tell you this. I was jealous when we were around that jetty and you were able to work it better. Now, the one thing that you didn't have was any ease clearing the weeds off of that prop.
It's difficult. That's a little sketchy because I got to lean all the way I got to turn myself around and literally lay across the back of the boat to reach. And I'm over 6 feet tall. I've got real long arms. So I don't think a lot of people would be able to reach that drive like that to clear it.
I definitely wouldn't. There's no way. There's no way. And I'm over 6 feet as well, but I'd be in the water. Definitely. Let's talk a little bit about let's talk about when, because we're coming into the season right now of when they're supposed to be there. Now, the common belief, and this includes southern waters as well, but the common belief is the sheepshead are there now, but they start biting at 60 degrees. They become actively feeding at 60 degrees. Have you seen anything to say that that's not correct?
No.
So that's what you're looking for 60 degrees, and we were 55
Yeah,
yesterday.
I mean, it's definitely been my first ones of the season, definitely over 65. I mean, I'm by no means an expert on the behavior of these fish. I can just tell you from my experiences of when I've caught them. I mean, who knows? There's evidence now that they could be here all year and that they're breeding here and that there's little one. I mean, even
one's the earliest.
Dave Scholl had pictures of them in his minnow traps late season. Teeny tiny fry. Little tiny fry that he posted on his page. From Absecon Bay Sportsman Center. So who knows? I mean, this is all still very new to a lot of us. You know what I mean?
I guess then let's take a different approach to the question, kind of what Ed was starting to ask. What's the earliest that you've caught one, and when are you going to start targeting them this year?
May.
Mid-May, early May?
It might be a little more difficult with the temptation of the early flounder season. You know what I mean? Right. So it might be a little more difficult for me because I might be a little distracted, but May is when I'm really going to start thinking about it.
So if flounder were going to open on the 22nd this year, which I think was one of the options, when would you start fishing for
May? Because I'll go when there's nothing in between. There's nothing more fun than May's a great time if you want to play catch and release to catch big tog inside. That's a good time.
Yeah.
So you go play around, and that's usually how it starts, I guess, for me.
All right, so tog closes, and the next day you're out, and you're like, all right, I'm changing
There's nothing to do.
Where I'm looking in the water column, I'm going up higher.
Well,
in the water column.
And then if I'm not getting a bite, I get bored and I drop it all the way to the bottom and try and catch a tog. You know what I mean? But that goes back to, like we said, why a lot of people not targeting them is I mean, what else here are that time of year are you really pulling up to a piling or something like that in deep water or wherever? And let's say if it's a bridge, sod bank, that's a different, you're going to definitely kind of put it down towards the bottom there if you're targeting sheepshead on sod banks. But what else are you dropping 15, 20 feet down into the water column that's 40, 50 feet deep for? That's the way I look at it.
Right.
So, you know what I mean? You're not going to consistently get them. You might get them bycatch on the bottom, but if you consistently try 15, 20 feet into the water column, maybe a little bit deeper, 30 feet, but if you want the best thing I could say for that detail is go back and watch your episode with Koa where he does his seminar, because he explained it better than, the way he speaks and just the way he describes it is he teaches it his, what he's learned, and he describes it so well and goes, that was a good episode. If you really want to learn about catching them, go back and watch that, because he described that. He just put it to a T right there.
Quad does a great job explaining it. For those that are watching the stream or watching a replay, it is a live stream from just about a month ago. It's essentially the Sheepshead seminar that he did for the boat shows with amazing attendance and amazing feedback. I mean, ask anybody. Quad knows what he's doing. Some of the top fish in the area. Yeah, they're looking for him and trying to get on his boat with him or get him onto their boat to help them to dial in. If you're listening on the podcast, it is not on a podcast. You'll have to go to the YouTube channel and you'll have to watch the live stream for the seminar, because it's a little different than just a live stream. Now the live stream that he did last year on Sheepshead with us, that'll go up this summer on one of the weekends that or one of the Mondays that I'm gone for vacation and we're not going to do a live stream. We're going to use that for the podcast, but not the seminar. But the seminar is something that people should check out. Definitely.
Where are we going, Rich? Vacation?
Well, I'm going to OBX.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to Outer Banks, and then I'm actually going to South Jersey for a week as well. So yeah, I'm gonna try the southern.
We'll get his
sheepshead.
address and harass him.
Well, we're all going to get together when I'm down there. So yeah, there won't be any harassing, and I'm going to try to rope Qua into coming down too, because it'll be during the week. So he doesn't like going down on the weekends.
I don't blame him.
No, you can't blame him. So all right, so now when let's say you're targeting them early May, because I know a lot of people aren't going to start opening day for Fluke. They're going to say, okay, well, I'm going to wait a couple of weeks still. And that could be a good time to target them. The water temperature yesterday in Absecon inlet was 55 degrees. So it's close. I've seen pictures on social media. There are sheepshead being caught now. They're just not really active. So they're here. They're eating because they're here. But they're not. It sounds to me like they're not quite active yet. Are you going to say bridges and rock piles, or are you looking at sod banks at this time of year?
I guess, like I said, I'm going to jump around to wherever I can until I, find one. I guess that's really the best way that I could describe it is I'll try the bridges. I'll try the sod banks. Most the bridges and sod banks that I fish are relatively close together. So it's, it's doable and distant within distance. It all depends. It all depends on the weather. It depends on the wind. It depends. I'm one person that's in a kayak that I don't like fighting current and wind, especially, like inlets that really get ripping. I don't like do it. So I let that dictate a lot of the places that I end up fishing. What can I fish? You know what I mean?
You were the first one out of there yesterday. You were packed up and gone. You didn't even say anything. You just disappeared. And Ed's like, where did he go? I was like, I don't know.
I'll wait for you though.
Well,
Yeah, you did wait for us. John, you've done a lot of research on the sheepshead. You're really geared up for them this year. What's your strategy going to be in May?
I'm actually going to head out May 6th is the plan for Fluke. And May 7th, I'm debating what I want to do. I don't know if I want to go out for drum or anything, but sheepshead, if the temperature's right, I think I'm going to maybe give it a shot. If Ed can get me some sheepshead jigs made up in time.
I'm looking at a pile of them, homie.
All right. Sounds good, buddy. But this year, I think I bought the right rod as I'm going to use that Century Weapon Junior. That's rated 1/4 to 1.5. And I mean, when you listen to certain guys, they compare it to a trout rod is what the gear you want for sheepshead fishing. Like that's the saltwater trout rod is basically the best way to describe it. You're looking for the movement in the rod. You're not really feeling a bite. And that's where I messed up a lot last year. I was waiting for a feel, and finally it clicked. I had 2 hooked, and I made rookie mistakes. Started cranking, they ran for the pilings and just sheared my line. Should have just let them run. So this year, I think I might start out early. It looks like Chris down at Tight Lines is already getting sand fleas, which means I don't have to rake them up already. See if I can start finding some fiddlers around. And I'm going to go hammer down, around the bridges. I've already noticed around the bridges, the barnacles are starting to come in pretty nicely already. And that's one indicator that you're looking for is start looking for some barnacles. You want to see life on some of this structure, and that's where you're going to find them.
So what I want to talk about next, and it kind of piggybacks on what John was just saying, is I want to talk about bait with you, Mike, and get a sense of what you're using. But I want to start off by telling you, John, Tightline sells barnacles too. So,
and I also want to tell you, you can keep your cooked and peeled shrimp.
They did not work for him yesterday in short talk. The clam worked.
Let Frank Mahalik know himself too.
Not at all.
So Mike, what are you using for bait when let's say you're just going out, you're not looking for anything except for sheepshead. What are your top 3 baits that you're going to be using?
Top 3? Oh man. Honestly, I can give you top 2 that I've caught caught sheepshead on. I'm not saying, look, a lot of people do great with them with sand fleas, and I know they work. The only reason I don't use them is just because of the access built, like just the access to them. I don't like buying them. I'm not going to go all the way to the beach and dig them up. So My top two, and I don't really notice a difference. I've caught them on both, but I go for either fiddlers or Asian shore crabs, and that only depends on if I'm going to catch bait the night before. I'm probably not going to ride all the way. I'm probably going to just go down the street and go catch fiddlers. If I intend on catching bait on my way out, then I'm going to go catch shore crabs. If when I go out, it's high tide, I'm going to go the night before and I'm going to catch fiddlers by me. So that's really what it depends on. But fiddlers or shore crabs, always a whole crab. Never on pieces of green crab. If I caught them, it's always on a whole crab.
And are you leaving legs and
I pull the claws off? I leave the legs.
And you leave the legs.
I leave the legs on those.
Yeah, I tend to do that for tog, and people look at me like I'm an idiot.
I think maybe for me it's a natural presentation. That's the only reason why I leave the legs. I just don't want them grabbing that big old fiddler claw and pulling the whole crab off by the fiddler claw.
So that's a little bit of why you might get that look. Just because with tog, especially, if you leave those legs on, they have a tendency to pick at those legs more than they do the crab hole. And that's what usually makes it rip it right off is picking at those.
If I'm togging and I'm using quarters of green crab and stuff like that, like bigger green crabs, I'm taking all those legs off of that. But I'm, a quarter sized green crab or something, I'm just pulling the claws off and leaving the whole crab on there, legs and all.
I mean, you're talking two different worlds when you come to that size. So I totally agree. Using a small bait, leave it alone. Just rip the claws off so you don't get pinched. But
yeah, and they hurt. The fiddlers hurt.
Yeah, they can. Not like a blue crab though, man. Nothing hurts to me. None of them hurt. If you've been bit good by a blue crab, no crab bite hurts.
Well, I think we all have. By the way, they're a good bait for sheepshead down south.
They use them down there.
They use everything, but they use sand fleas a ton down there, a ton. But it's also extremely easy to get 5-gallon buckets, worth of sand fleas within an hour. You can fill up an entire 5-gallon bucket. Last year, and they use it. They use it. They bring it out on the boat. They use it, and then they dump all the rest out at the end of the day, and they do it again the next morning. The thing that I don't like about sand fleas is that they stink. When they start dying, it is the worst smell.
They don't live very long either, do they?
No.
I don't think they're any worse than green crabs. Them green crabs get nasty.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I'm buying them because I'm driving 2 hours, so I'm just gonna buy them, and they come in those dumb plastic containers. And if there's one dead in there, it like kills them all. It's like something about it just seems to kill them all, and it's just terrible. I would say about the smell, not that it's a big conversation piece, but I was telling Ed yesterday I had this terrible smell in my truck, and a green crab got out and died under the floor mat. And I was like, oh, it's terrible. So I cleaned my entire truck out. And then I was driving down yesterday and I had the smell again. I'm like, what the hell? It smells like the crab again. And as I opened up my, I have one of the folding bump boards. There was another one in there. I was like, oh my God. So I threw that out the window. I have disgusting smells in my truck all the time from squid that I forgot, or you run off the water when the storm's coming in and you leave bait on the hook, and I throw them in I throw the whole rod in the truck. Gulps. It's usually gulp juice all over the seats.
Unknown substances on the back window.
Yeah, we have. There's something on the back window. I don't know what it is, man. It obviously came off of a fishing rod, but I don't know what the hell it was. But there's something on the inside of the window in the back of the truck.
That's funny. Yeah. You're like, is that on the outside? No, it's on the inside.
I'm like, how the? Yeah, it's a disaster. I'm a freaking disaster. All right, so those are the baits. Ed, any thought on bait from you or?
I mean, I've never caught one, so I know. I mean, it is what it is. I'm going with Asian crabs. That's going to be my first shot at it. And I mean, fiddlers for us are pretty easy to catch.
Yeah.
There's quite a few good spots within a couple minute driving distance.
Bring your bug spray.
Yeah, bring the bug spray. But yeah, I mean, that's probably what I'm going to go with. I'm sure I'll be with one of us when I catch one. So looking forward to it.
I'm probably going to start with fiddlers because where I'm planning on going, I can catch them right where I launch. So plenty of them in that area. Now let's talk about the technique, the biggest part of it. So actually, let's talk about the gear first. Mike, what are you specifically using for it? You have John talking about using the Weapon Junior, which is a extremely nice rod. It's a high-end rod, but most people are probably going to get into it with something else to see if they like fishing for sheepshead first before they start investing in things. What are you using?
As far as rod two different rods that I use. I like a shorter rod, especially when I'm in tight. And 6'3" and a 7-foot. And they're both Travalas. The 6'3" is a Travala light, and the 7-foot's a Travala medium light.
And what pound braid and leader are you using?
10 on one. The 6'3" light is 10 pound braid, 15 pound leader, sometimes a 20 pound leader. Not normally, usually a 15 pound fluorocarbon leader, and then 15 pound on the 7-foot and 20 pound leader.
Okay, so you're using essentially the same stuff that you could use for fluke. Sensitive tip on those rods.
Basically, I got a couple baitcaster rods that I'll use, but I typically use them like a bass rod, kind of using for like soft swim baits and top water. Not usually bottom fishing. That's just my preference. So those two spinning rods, I use that pretty much for everything. Those two rods, those spinning,
Okay. Yeah. I mean, they're similar styles to the ones that I would be using. One of the questions that we have, are they down in Cape May? Are they up in Manasquan? I know that not only are they in Cape May, in all of Cape May County, but I know I saw a picture from a guy I know that caught one by accident. He was tog fishing last week. He sent it to me, texted it to me. So the surprise catch of the day, but he wouldn't be targeting them quite yet. So I would wait for it to warm just a little bit.
I'd imagine that they're all the way up to New York, maybe a little bit further here and there. Without saying, my biggest came off of a Cape May County sod bank. So Delaware Bay has always had them. Guys down there catch them off the rock piles out there. They catch them all the time out off the walls out there. So, there's no tell. I mean,
they named Sheepshead Bay in New York after them. So they're there.
There's a couple other areas locally named after Sheepshead that I won't describe, but I'll show you. We'll explore it soon.
Yeah. And Qua is mentioning it's kind of cold for the black. It's kind of cold for them right now, but the black drum migration is typically when people say that they show up. So when the trees the dogwood trees blossom
and the morels grow on the west side of the hemlock.
Yeah, all of those things. So basically, what you're saying is when the water temperature is above 60, is a good time to start targeting them. They should start to become more active. But with sheepshead, they're going to be active. I mean, they have a pretty big temperature tolerance for activity. I mean, I was fishing for reds down in Outer Banks, and the water was over 90 degrees, and the sheepshead were just blitzing on crabs all around me while I'm out there. It's only about a foot of water, so I can literally see them swimming by and just attacking everything. So they're going to be active for the entire summer. But I think they're going to pick up soon, which is going to be 60, 65 degrees is probably the best time to really start zeroing in on those. Black drum, you should start targeting them now. They are being caught in size and numbers already, all the way up through Great Bay. So it's a good time.
I think that May is when it kind of starts off. June can be okay. I think from what I've observed, the best time to really go and target sheepshead is September and October. My last one last year was November 6th. So
it's a nice long season.
Yeah, but November 6th, that water was still above 60 degrees. You know what I mean?
Right.
Early November, it's still up there. So,
well, to go back to that red drum trip in the Outer Banks. I mean, were you on a flat? Like you were in shallow water, right?
Yep, that was on the flats. They're cruising the flats because they're looking for all the crabs that are out there, and they're all over the place.
What makes it? Because it seems like to me around, at least around here, it seems like they're only going to hang on pilings and stuff.
I don't think so.
No,
who's to say they're not on the flats up here in Absecon?
I wish Rich could pull those videos up, but I can remember that day that we were fishing, and Ryan caught one that may have been bigger than that first one that I caught. That we were in Cape May County on that sod bank. We were getting tog here, catching tog off the sod bank, and it was real slow. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Jacob got bit, and then he caught that one. And then out of nowhere, Ryan got hammered, had that big one, and right as I looked over at him, I got hit. And hooked up, and we both hooked up at the same time, and they were both giants. So I don't think they're just sitting there. I think they just appear. I mean, we'd been there for a good period of time fishing it, and then all of a sudden it's just like boom, boom, and they appeared.
They probably saw that you guys, fishing and whatever.
I don't think they do a lot of cruising, but I think compared to like a tog, I think they do a lot more cruising than a tog does.
Well, I think they do.
No doubt.
And I think that's one thing Qua had mentioned, they'll hit a certain piling, and if it's not there within a few minutes, they're off to another one.
That's what I mean by power fishing.
Or you just say, I'm staying there and I'm going to wait for them to come by this
Stick
piling.
it out.
Yeah. So I think there are a couple ways to do it. Now, the one thing, Ed, so I was seeing a lot of sheepshead down there on the flats. However, had I gone to the bridge at Oregon Inlet, I probably would have pulled in a couple hundred
easily.
Whereas I wouldn't necessarily target them on the flats just because you see them cruising by, and grabbing crabs left and right. So if you see a crab, you just keep watching because something's going to come and grab it when you're drifting through the flats down there. But Dan Mancari said, he was fishing down there and he ran out of bait. He must have caught 100 sheepshead, I think he said, on the bridge at Oregon Inlet. So it's a whole different thing. Now they're also much smaller. It's a whole different type of fishery.
I'd say like 8-inch 8-inch sheepshead down there is like the equivalent to our burgal when in the summer when you're trying to tog fish.
See, I've never caught a burgal.
I think that's what's that?
I've never caught one.
No.
I caught my first one on a tog trip last year with John, and I actually ended up foul hooking it, and then a sea bass ended up eating it. That was the first one I caught. John, I didn't even know what it was. I'd never caught a burgal in my life.
Yeah, that was pretty wild.
Yeah, well, it was a nice keeper size bass. So
yeah, it was definitely it's like 18-inch sea bass. It was pretty big.
Yeah, it's nice and tasty. Fish tacos. Fish tacos with the tog that night. Yeah, we'll do. Well, John will be all about that. So let's talk about the technique then. So we've got the rod, we've got the line. Now you go, I'm going to say this, you go a lot lighter than a lot of people when you're fishing that heavy structure with that 20-pound leader on there. I happen to agree with that. I like using the lighter, especially around bridges because it's easier to get that jig down. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to catch that current as much. So I tend to go a bit lighter there.
That's the whole reason. And what you got to remember is when they say, especially, with braid, when they say a 10 pound break, 10 pound test, its breaking limit is far more than 10 pound. That's why, for instance, when I have on, and it goes for 10 pound braid, 15 pound leader, 15 pound braid, 20 pound leader. When I get even, when I'm tog fishing and I get snagged up, I tie a good FG knot, which is that's the biggest thing for me. I love it. But when I do snag and I break off, I break off down at the jig. I don't break my braid to leader knot. So that 10-pound test isn't giving there. That line's giving down at the jig at that 15 pounds. Same for the 15 and the 20. It's breaking at the 20 pound, not at the 15 pound where the knot's at, which I love, because nothing worse than being out there fishing and then especially in a kayak, and having to drift away and tie another leader on.
Especially in FG. I can tie them pretty quick.
I can't tie them I tie a strong one, but I can't tie them that fast. I haven't gotten it down where I can tie it with tension in my hands. I have to stand on my line still.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, there's some things you can do. You know, I would recommend anybody who wants to learn how to tie an FG knot, just look up Salt Strong FG knot on YouTube. They have some great tutorials on how to do it, and you'll see the one owner of Salt Strong, Luke, and he'll tie it in less than a minute. And he uses there are a couple of different techniques in the different videos, like using your pinky to provide tension. Okay. I use the spool of the I put the rod in the rod holder and I just pull the line through my teeth until it's taut, and then I just hang the spool to create the tension.
I got you.
So it's a lot easier, but you're also tying it right up to your nose.
It's so worth it, man. If you learn how to tie it, it's a heck of a knot, and you don't even feel it go through the guides. You really don't.
Yeah, it's really smooth. John, you use a uni to uni, right?
Yes, that's primarily what I'm using on everything.
That's what I always used to use, but I'm a believer in that FG knot.
See, the difference is, so I am as well. The difference is John wants to be back down within a second, and he is. He'll be fishing for minutes longer than me, and sometimes that's the difference between that big fish and no fish. So I'm kind of torn. I'm going to stick with the FG, but it does annoy me when John breaks off, I break off before him, and John's down there hooking up another fish, and I'm still cutting the tag end. I still haven't even put the lure on. So
the thing is, the Unity Uni is the second strongest knot. So it's, with that being said right there, I'm not going to worry about the first strongest knot. If I can get there down quicker, being the second strongest knot, that's the route I'm going.
It's a pick your poison thing. I'm still going to recommend the FG. I like when the leader breaks down near the lure, because then I don't have to retie. If I see that little, I would love to have that knot fail before the leader fails, on a snag, because it's not gonna go on a fish. It's not. I mean, if I have 20-pound leader on there, it's going to snap at 20. The knot's going to come out at 20 or 18 or 19. You should be able to bring in any sheepshead with a 20-pound leader, strength of leader. Now, it doesn't, I'm not talking about if it goes around a bridge piling, if it starts going against rocks and mussels and shells and barnacles, they could chafe it and break it off. But that's the way I look at it. If I can get them clear, which means let go of the bridge and let the current take that kayak. That's the best thing about a kayak. It'll just
That's what you have to do. Yeah. If you sit there right next to it and try and horse him up out of there, he's going to win. He's going to win. They seem to always take the path of least resistance and come out into the current and then run with the current. So if you just let him do his thing, push yourself off and start moving with the current, they seem to come with it. But if you sit there and try and horse them, you're not going to win. I've made the mistake before. You get super excited and you just want to get him up there, and he just takes it. He takes control, and you're not going to win that fight. You got to let him run. You got to let him get tired. I mean, you've seen the videos of how many runs they'll keep taking. They'll keep going. They'll keep going. They'll keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and I think Quad actually mentioned the same thing. If it goes around a piling, just wait. Mm-hmm. It'll come back. It'll find it's easier to come back.
Don't put any pressure on them.
And that's
very little pressure, just to know that you're still keeping it straight in its mouth.
That's part of the reason why you also get away with using the lighter line.
Not biting
the technique. You push off and you're floating away. Mm-hmm. You're going with the fish. You don't need that back, the backbone of that line to do the work. You're letting the fish tire himself.
Yeah, I'm like a tog where you just it's a wrestling match. It's an all-out brawl. Which I think is why John loves the tog so much. It's just a all-out slugfest. It's just who's going to win. It's just pound on each other and see who wins.
Hey man, you put gear to the test. That's what I love about it. It's let me see how far I could push my stuff to the limit and see where it goes.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about technique. So you're coming up on and we're just going to keep talking about bridges, and if you want to talk about if you use a different technique somewhere else, throw that in there, Mike. But you're coming up on a bridge. How are you fishing it? How are you fishing the water column?
Well, first of all, as light as you can go, anywhere's from down to 3/8, quarter ounce, half ounce. I don't really think, I don't know for sure. I mean, I'm sure it can, but no more than half ounce. And then, like I said, don't hit the bottom. Drop it 10, 15 feet and just hold it there. Try your best. Keep it from scoping out and just hold it there as long as you can. Maybe drop it down a little bit further. Nothing's happened. And then from that point on, it's your choice. Are you going to move to a different spot, or are you going to just kind of sit there and just wait it out?
How long are you typically fishing? If you're going down a few feet every time, you're not getting anything. How many times are you retrying it, or even this? Some of these bridge pilings are pretty big. Are you fishing one side of the back end, the down current side, and then moving across it, or are you just kind of dropping it down the middle a few times and then moving on to some other place?
It's always different. It's always different, I guess. Honestly, it's as long as my attention span can keep me there for that period of time, without anything happening and wondering what's going on. If you're fishing a big bridge, you got a lot of pilings. You're always on that down current side. You have to find the eddy. You can't be sitting there. If it's scoping out and the current's rushing it out, they're not there. That's just not where they're at. You know what I mean? But a big thing to finding them is just being observant. Understanding when you're catching them, what the tide was doing at the time. And then has been mentioned before, look for clear evidence of them being there and feeding. They come up and they like to eat stuff off of the side of structure like mussels and barnacles. So look for that, especially at low tide when all that stuff's going to be exposed. Look for it. You'll see it. You'll see them chewing on it. You know what I mean? Like marks from where they've chewing it. If you haven't personally seen them chewing on it, themselves, you've seen videos of them right up the surface, almost finning, just chomping. So
yeah, you can see the scrape marks. Definitely.
Yeah. It's like the biggest thing to figuring out is just being observant and just realizing what you did and what made it happen. It's the only thing I can say. Right. And patience. That's the other thing. You can't, like I said, you're not going to catch sheepshead if you're flounder fishing. That's the other thing.
I know a guy who he was fishing, actually lost touch with him for almost a year until we just reconnected a little bit ago. And he was catching some really big sheepshead a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And he would work one bridge and he would spend the whole day working different pilings, different places. And but he would come out of it with a double digit nearly every time. And he would just work the same thing. But it sounds like you're kind of similar. Like you'll work the different pilings, but you're not going to sit there waiting for the school of fish to come to the one that you have, the one piling that you're on.
No, I'll definitely jump around from piling to piling. Definitely.
And what tides are you fishing? So, that's one of the questions that James is asking. Is slack tide worth fishing? Are you looking for incoming, outgoing, or are you looking at slack tides or anything close to it?
Outgoing tide will obviously work. Outgoing tide will work, the lower tide, as long as a big thing is water clarity, clean water. I've definitely caught them at low tide. On the higher end of the tide, definitely dead slack is probably not your best time. It's a good time to be there and start. You want a little current moving through, but not so much that it's not fishable. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, well, think about these fish too. They're probably less feeding. It won't be as easy to feed in the middle of the tide at the highest flow rates, so you're probably going to look towards the upcoming slack tide or right after the slack tide is probably a good time to start. Otherwise, you're going to get pushed all over. So unless you have the trolling motor, again, not spot lock, but unless you have a trolling motor, it gets really tough when that current's
I'd
really
imagine moving. That even when the tide's moving around like bridges and stuff, I'd imagine that if you can find that eddy and just find the place that you can, present it vertically and not it scoping out. And, I'm sure they don't, they've got to, when even the current's moving through there like real hard, they got to be sitting somewheres around there in an eddy or somewheres, they've gone somewheres, you know what I mean? They're sitting somewheres, and I'm sure that you could catch them. But this is just, kind of what I go for.
So let's talk about docks,
Mhm.
because this is my big thing. So docks are definitely going to still also hold sheepshead. And I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about docks as often. And it depends on where you are too, because you can get into some really good structure that will hold sheepshead that is out of the strong currents in some of these docks. Now, if you're on the ICW, you're probably going to get the ripping tides through there and on some of the docks, if not most of the docks, but there's always going to be something in there that's a little bit less current. And you also had the back bays.
Right.
And I used to see sheepshead when I was little swimming around our dock.
Right.
So I think, have you fished the dock?
No, I haven't really. I mean, I've tried it. I haven't had much success with it. I know they're there. It's funny you mentioned that ICW is, it's not a spot burn because it's just kind of more of a technique burn. It never worked for me, but I do know of a few people that have caught them when it's fishable and caught them off of random random channel markers off of the ICW.
Yeah.
Just a random one that pops up when you can. Again, presentation is everything. When you can get the opportunity to present it right, and it's worked for them. So, man, if you've got, like I said, as long as the food's there for them, they're going to be on it, and there's no given time or place to say that it's going to be there. It's just, you got to go do it. You got to go do it.
One thing is that I don't have any research to back this up. However, I'm gonna say that and I see people doing that all the time. You know who's sheepshead fishing because they go flying down the channel and all of a sudden they're stopped. They're stopped right at the channel marker, and they're there for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then they're moving down again at full speed to the next one. The fact that they're catching them there, and the fact that you're catching them there, has to indicate that there's a decent number of fish. I mean, that can't be their first choice. A random channel marker, unless they're just stopping by on the way to somewhere else.
I agree with you that there's probably a decent number of fish because there's only X amount of people that are actually targeting them. You know what I mean? And understand kind of the technique, how to do it. So look, if you can live somewhere and you can be like, look, I'm going to go target sheepshead and be successful at it, there's got to be quite a few of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying, hey, this is a fishery that's going to be renewable and we should go out and fish the hell. But I mean, they're there and it's definitely something that you can go and say, hey, this is what I'm going to go target for the day and be successful.
Yeah. And if the spot Mike is talking about, if that's what I'm thinking of, there's definitely a lot better places for these fish to be. So if they're on it, then they're everywhere.
Yeah, I've seen guides stopping at those in the past, and I've fished them a couple times as I'm going by. I'm like, what am I even doing? I want to get to the next bridge, but I'll stop every once in a while and give it a go. But I think a big point is we have a lot of people that fish for sheepshead, a lot, but I don't think we have. Well, let me put it this way: I think we have a lot of people in New Jersey that will try to catch a sheepshead, but we have very few that actually fish for sheepshead
that are successful.
Yeah, because I don't think people put in the time, and I'm going to put myself in that category. So last season, I was like, I'm going to catch some sheepshead this year, and it's not going to be bycatch for once. I didn't fish for sheepshead. Right. I would throw a random bait down. I'd fish for 10 minutes, and I'd be like, I'm on for fluke, and I would just move on, and I'd just start, fishing for something else because maybe I just don't have the patience for it all the time, but. I think that's most people.
I think this year, though, you're going to find that you get burnt out of fluke now that we have a whole lot more time to catch them or to fish for them. So I think you'll notice this year that we're going to target sheeps a lot more, like dedicated.
Maybe I'm addicted to fluke. To me, it's like I love it.
Catch a big sheep's head.
Yeah, but
it's going to change your mind.
Towards the end of last year, me and Mike were burnt out. We were like, we don't even want to go. We didn't even.
I'd rather catch a big sheep's head than a big fluke.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I think so. It might just be the romance of it and the new, like, you know what I mean? But it's fun, man.
Let me put it to you this way: have you ever caught a porgy?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, for Rich and Ed, have you guys ever caught a porgy?
No, I've never gone porgy fishing in my life.
I caught a little one by mistake.
They pound for pound might be one of the most powerful fish.
So, Mike, you know where I'm going with this. It's I would say a sheepshead is a porgy, like on steroids.
It's a
times 10.
giant, a big sheep's head is like catching a over 10-pound porgy, and porgy are very strong fighting
So it's
fish.
kind of like a tog with speed.
No, because that's the thing is a tog fight's completely different. If you once you've caught, right away, I've caught something different. If your first time, there's no question about it. There's no head shaking like you get from a tog. It's completely different. Right away, okay, this is not a tog.
Yeah, so let me put it this way. It's the fish itself, it's not the fight. That is the hook for me. So a lot of people are like, I got to go out and catch the biggest fish. And for me, it's I want to catch a specific fish because I like the challenge of fooling that fish. So I've caught really big mahi. I've caught mahi on the fly. I've caught tuna. I used to constantly target shark back when it was legal in the 80s and 90s. And we would catch big shark, everything, bluefish, striped bass. I never went for porgy. And that's how I was. I always wanted the thing with the best fight. And I'll tell you right now, I think the best fight that I have had, and I haven't caught a monster sheepshead. So just to be fair, I haven't. But a red drum, to me, when you catch it in the shallows, is a brute of a fish. And that is, if I want to go for a fight, maybe it's equivalent to that. I mean, those things, they have nowhere to go in the shallows except for out and away. But I'll tell you this, when I'm in the Outer Banks this year, I'm going to catch one redfish on the first day, and then I'm going to spend the rest of the time going for speckled trout because I enjoy trying to target and find them more than trying to find a redfish. So for me, it's a little bit different, right? I'm not looking for the fight necessarily. And I think it's because I've had so many fights. It's more of the hook. I'm looking for the hookup. And to me, hooking a big fluke is that's the challenge that gets me going. So I don't know. It's just a personal preference thing. I'm not knocking anything. I just think it's going to be different for everyone.
Absolutely.
But I don't think I'm going to get sick of going for fluke. But to your point, Ed, with the longer season, I may be more willing to give up a day or a week, because I typically go once a week. I may be more willing to give up that weekend for fluke to go for sheepshead and actually dedicate myself to targeting the species, without feeling like I might miss a whole week.
I hear you.
There's actually a spot down in Cape May Wildwood area that I actually think we could make it a red drum trip / sheepshead day. We could go out and look for some redfish.
And that spot, I know the spot that you're talking about. We've talked about this, and it's confirmed. Yeah, that there are 100% there are redfish there. They're not a lot, and I think that fishery is I don't think it's big enough. It's not like sheepshead. Sheepshead's a real fishery now. I think red drum might be turning that direction, and God, I hope they do. If there's going to be one species to come up from down south, I really hope that to turn into a fishery that you can actually target and have some reasonable chance of success. I hope it's the reds.
It used to be here.
It used to
historically, it was a giant reds. It used to be, and I don't know what happened. I'm sure somebody's got some input on it of what happened, but I just know historically that this was a big area for giant redfish.
Well, it was the redfish capital of the world. It was New Jersey.
Ocean City.
Yeah, yep. And I forget. Was it Ocean City or was it Manasquan?
It was something. Ocean City.
It was Hereford Inlet.
Hereford Inlet. It was Ocean City area.
Well, no. Yeah. Hereford had a really super secret bull red run every year for about a week, maybe 2 weeks. But there was a place that actually was built on the back of the redfish,
right?
Tourism. It
might be Ocean City then, because that's where you're starting to see an uprising again of redfish come through. You see a lot more of those caught in the surf. Anywhere from Atlantic City down to, I'd say, about Corson's Inlet.
Yeah, there was a red in the surf last year in Atlantic City.
Yeah, and Wakefield caught one the year before. Seth did.
Yep.
That guy seems to catch everything that's odd. he catches all the alternate species, I think, and I think I don't know him, but it's just my sense is that he probably pisses off his brothers and all the other guys that fish with him, because it always seems to be him with the odd fish that everyone wants to grab. And it's a picture of Seth, unless I'm getting his name wrong. I think it's Seth. So, all right. So Mike, what other things should we talk about for Sheepshead, the people that want to go out and seriously target them this season?
Trying to find that right area. Fish the eddies. You're looking for clear water. I mean, a big thing I can't stress it enough too is that tackle and using the lighter line. I really can't stress that enough. The other, I mean, and like I said, just go out and look for, try different spots. Look for, deep drops that are real close to sod banks. It doesn't have to be right on the sod bank, drop off to super deep. Try, just go out there and just, learn. That's the biggest thing. You're not gonna figure it out sitting at home.
Can't catch it from the couch.
No, right. That's the biggest thing, is just get out there, do it, and explore. That's probably my best piece of advice right there. There's, so many people that are, starting to do this, and, we all know, there's no big secret. We all know what bridges are near what inlets, and all you got to do is go out there. If you own a depth finder, go out and start poking around when the tide's right and you can present it right, and just start trying new spots. There's nothing there, especially I like the sod banks a lot, especially trying to figure that out. And it's just, there's probably so many different spots that are there and we don't even know yet. You know what I mean? That you could fish. So
I can definitely see that. And I know you're using Ed's jigs, and you said you're using 3/8 up to about a half an ounce. Are there any, I just wanted to ask this real quick because I got to place another order with Ed. Are there any specific colors that you're using? I know, you hear people just give me the gray lead head.
Yeah, I fish the gray lead heads. That's usually
the big boy came on the green, the chartreuse.
What's that?
The big one you
the chartreuse. That first one over 10 pounds was chartreuse. I got a good one on that jetty mussel color.
Oh yeah, jetty mussel.
I love that color.
That color's
that's my favorite color
about that one.
Ed always hooks me up with some jigs, so I always just grab the plain ones that were just poured that he didn't spend too much time on, where I'm going to just snag them, and that's probably why I grab the lead all the time.
Well, whatever works, right? But yeah, the jetty mussel is my favorite for tog.
I do.
And the dirty diaper, and I did catch 2 tog on a new color that is unnamed and unavailable yet.
I think we're going to call it Bourbon Street. We'll just leave it at that.
Bourbon Street. That's a good name for it.
I've caught a lot of tog on that dirty diaper too.
And for people that aren't aware of that, those are the colors of Ed's jigs.
We like to get creative with our colors. We got to have fun with this. There's what's the other one? Joe Dirty Crab.
Gold Digger. That one, that's a cool looking. I never even tried that. I'm sure it'll get. I'm sure a tog will bite
10-pound tog last year.
Did it?
John, you have any thoughts? I know I know you're going to hit him heavy this year. You're going to put in your time on him.
Hey, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, it's the gear is ready. The Iowa Ballistic 3000 with that Weapon Junior, and I'm telling Ed right now, it can be plain Jane lead. It doesn't even need to be a color. Like I said, I think we're going to start May 7th if those temperatures are right and see what happens.
So why don't we do this? Why don't you let's do a little experiment here. So John, why don't you buy from Ed just the plain ones, no color, and I'll buy some of the colors, and let's see if we can do a side-by-side comparison over the course of the entire season. Let's just see, what works out best.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with that. Let's at least try and hook a couple first and finally get a few underneath our belt. And then from there, then we could start experimenting and see. But I really don't think there's a difference with using color and not using color when it comes to these fish.
I do want to try a couple other. Definitely. I mean, I love jigging them. I love using jigs for them. But I definitely do want to kind of this year, maybe when I can kind of maybe explore with a couple other techniques. We always, when I was younger, when we would catch them down south, this was before I even knew what a tog jig or a banana type jig or a snapper jig, whatever you want to call it, before I even knew what it was. And it was, split shot rigs, Carolina rigs, stuff like that. So there's no, and I remember Koa mentioning about a float rig around rocks, and that's works down. That's probably a phenomenal idea to try and use up here in shallower water around like jetties and stuff like that, or shallower docks, shallower pilings. Who knows? It's just.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things to try. I'm just going to leave with this because I have a very strong opinion the other direction. The people down in Outer Banks, and I keep bringing up Outer Banks because that's just where I go, guys. I mean, that's where I fish when I fish North Carolina.
I know what you're going to say.
Those tackle shops were going crazy about bringing down the like Ed's Jawbreaker jig. I mean, these are guys that live there, the locals, and they're like, no, don't get the rigs. You got to get this. If you're going to go out for so I went in, I had to get some popping corks for trout. And the guy's like, have you ever heard of a tog jig? I was like, yeah, I've got them in my box right now. He's like, they're amazing. He's like, don't ever buy another rig.
Right.
I'm
right.
Like, I don't use rigs.
Right.
He's like, what do you mean? How did you even hear of them? We just got them in. And I was like, well, I'm from New Jersey. I fish New Jersey. And he's like, well, that's where it came from. That's where they invented it. I'm like, I don't know that they invented it in New Jersey. But New Jersey definitely has some big tackle guys I think the concept, I mean, it's completely different, but I think the concept kind of came from, like I said, what's like they call like a snapper jig, you know what I mean? Which was basically like, now that looks more like a snap, like, the weight is on the hook, but it's more like a cylinder shaped. It's not that fat, like, I think that shape of that was developed up here. I mean, obviously, a lot of people make tog jigs. I think what made it real big was obviously, Schaefer was, who he came up, he created a great idea as well. You know what I mean? So, there's always another way to skin a cat, there's more than one way.
But was it Dan or was it, what's his name from Magic?
I don't know. Let him fight it out. I don't care. It doesn't matter to me. I could care less.
I'm pretty sure it was Dan.
Probably, most likely. Yeah.
I don't have any specific information, but, and I don't know Dan. So let me just say that I don't know him, but I have talked to him before I knew who he was. And I would be surprised if it wasn't him that came up with it, because that guy just thinks. I mean, I imagine that he's the guy who is sitting down, having his coffee on the dock, looking at the boat, and all he's doing is thinking about a better way to catch a fish. So
that's what we're all.
I would be shocked if it wasn't him. Yeah. And I would also, from observing him for well over a decade through social media, before there was social media, he's a very honest guy. Yeah. So I think if he says that he was the one who did it, bet I would put my money on it. I'm not saying it's totally true. I'm just saying my money is on. And
regardless, he definitely drove the popularity of it, to what it is now.
Well, with that said, I still use Ed's.
Yeah, me too.
I like Ed's.
Yeah,
I love the hook on there. Yep. Love the hook. All right, so I think we're closed up. John, did you have anything else you want to add in?
The only other thing that we didn't cover, and I think maybe should be covered, is Mike, moon phases. I mean, have you noticed the difference between moon phases with fishing for these fish and not?
Have I noticed it? No, but I could be also just completely oblivious to it. That's my most honest answer. You know what I mean? I'm sure.
Are you talking about the currents, or are you talking about like fishing at night for them or something?
No, talking about like, do they bite on a full moon? Do they not bite on a new moon? That type of thing. You notice.
I honestly, I don't have an answer for that. I don't know. I know I think Koa mentioned it before. Definitely cold fronts. I think that's why September and October are so good, because of that just changing weather patterns. Just really gets them kind of triggered to start eating. As far as moon phase, I don't know. My biggest thing that I have noticed is definitely water clarity. That is a big thing that I've noticed. Just doesn't seem as good when the water's like dirty and murky. It seems like clear water works real well. I don't know if it's because they tend to kind of feed like that off of sight, eating stuff like that. I don't know what it is, but I've definitely noticed it makes a difference.
With the spring tides, the full and the new moon, you're going to end up with more current, which might change the times that you want to fish if you don't want to fish in the full current. But the water clarity, I mean, you're going to end up with all this stuff going through the water. So I can't answer the question, but I would say that, that might have some.
Moon doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Barometric drops.
Yeah.
Well, as he says, you have the drop in the barometric pressure and everything goes off. And for people that don't understand why, just think about it. It's essentially the air pressure. So if you're a fish and you're under all that water, you have all the weight of the water on top of you. So you have that weight under there. And then now you have increased pressure on the water when it's rising, and that can change the behaviors. Now, when it starts to lessen, then what people will often say is, as it starts to drop, which is typically before new weather comes in, because it brings the storm systems in, it kind of triggers something to them. It's like lighter. So kind of like the way that you think about it is there's less pressure on them. So they get a little bit more free and more active, and they feed heavily before that high pressure comes in and the storms come in and things like that. So the bite before the storm, it's based on the barometric pressure. So just for people that don't realize why, it just comes down to the weight of the air on the water and what it does to fish and their swim bladders and all of that other good stuff.
And lots of weird stuff happens around a full moon.
What was yesterday, a full moon?
It very well may have been. I don't know.
I don't know, but yesterday was, I'm not going to use the language I want to use. Yesterday was a day, and it was only a 3-hour fishing.
We managed a couple.
It was a cluster, to say the least.
Yeah, we did get a few keepers in there, but injuries, fights, groundings on jetties, all kinds of stuff happened. So there you have it. Big thanks to Mike for coming on to talk in detail about his approach to targeting sheepshead. For me personally, I think the most valuable insight shared by Mike was his push to take the tactics and the information from this podcast and just get out there and put in the time to find these awesome fish. Now, before I go, I do want to thank Don for providing a great review on the podcast on Apple. In that review, he said, "This is geared towards Northeast coastal angler. Great information on catching more fish, conservation, and much more. Make sure to check out the Fat Dad Fishing YouTube channel too." Don, can't thank you enough for the review. It really helps the podcast to grow, and it helps us to draw in more guests in the future. So if you have not already followed or subscribed to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, please do. And as mentioned with Don's review, please consider adding a positive review on any platform with that feature, especially Apple. That said, until next week, until next episode, get out there, get on the water, and get some tight lines.